Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swaggle. And in this video, we're taking a look at Go Collect's hottest trending comics for the week of June 25th. Now, for those who don't know, Go Collect puts out bi-weekly articles that switch between hottest comics and trending comics. Trending comics is a more curated list of the 5 books that are really starting to heat up in the market. But before I get into the video, if you guys could drop me a like or a comment or subscribe or enjoying the content, helps with the channel doing those things, I'd appreciate it. But let us get into this video here today. And of course, this article is written by Matt Tuck. I will put a link in the description if you guys want to do your own reading, but I will give you my breakdown here in this video, of course, today. But of course, the first book we got to talk about is this one right here, a DC book to start us off, Infinite Crisis number 5, the Jim Lee variant, new to the list, sitting in the 98th slot. And what is the significance of this? Well, of course, this would be the first full appearance of Jamie Reyes as the Blue Beetle, a book that came out in 2006, written by Jeff Johns and drawn by Jim Lee. Now, I'm sure you guys are very well aware that DC is currently working on the Blue Beetle film, and it recently came out the images of the Blue Beetle costume. We actually got our first look at Jamie Reyes as Blue Beetle, and I gotta say, the costume looks pretty incredible. A lot of people out there in the fandom were talking about some of the set photos coming out, talking about how the costume looks super accurate to the Blue Beetle character, and that really got the excitement for this book really starting to brew. I mean, of course, everybody was specking on this thing due to the fact that, you know, we knew that the film was in production. In fact, actually, at one point, it was a TV show, and then they actually converted it to a film, which sort of makes you wonder, like, if they have so much faith that they have, a feeling that it's going to be film worthy, they must be really believing in the project overall. So that's a really good sign. And a lot of people in the speculation market were really starting to think that this could be a big book for the future. And as we dig into the numbers for this one, let's take a look here at the 9.8s. We see 458 on the census, fair market value sitting at that $325 range. 30-day moving is 330. This is slightly down from where we were 1 year ago with, like, the height of the market in 2021. You can see that some of the sold prices were eclipsing that $400 figure. We had that little bit of a correction, a little spike up from the images, a little bit of a correction again, and now we're kind of feeling that new kind of floor level right there in that sweet spot at $332. And it'll be interesting to see, like, once we actually start to get this film, where the prices will eventually rise back up to, where this book is starting to level off. But regardless, it feels like collectors are thinking, hey, now is probably a good time to jump back in on this book if you're someone who believes in the Blue Beetle character. And then, of course, 2006 book, not going to see it slab too much at the low grade, but when I go into eBay looking for raw copies of this thing, typically you can see them being sold anywhere from that $50 to $80 range, depending on the deal and depending on the grade. All right, let's move on now to the 4th hottest trending comic of the week. And the 4th hottest trending comic of the week is one that I'm sure you guys have been looking at on all of the various hot lists. But this one, of course, is Spectacular Spider-Man number 98, new to the list, sitting in the 97th slot. And what is the significance of this? Well, of course, this would be the first appearance of the character known as Spot, a book that came out in 1984, written by Al Milgrom. Now, why is Spot trending? Well, you guys all know by now that Spot has been announced to be the villain of the sequel to Into the Spider-Verse, the next installment of the Sony Miles Morales animated film. We actually got some images of Spot. He definitely looks like he, is really cool in that film. Is going to fit right into that, really awesome animated aesthetic that the Into the Spider-Verse film originally had. And a lot of people in the market, once it was confirmed that Spot was going to be the villain, a lot of people really started to jump on to all of the various Spot keys. You got this one right here, which is number 98. You got 99 and 100, which I think are, some of his cover appearances. You got some earlier books as well that have the cameo and full appearance of him as the character before he becomes Spot. And all of the Spot books really jumped up in the market. But this definitely seems to be the one that is the go-to book if you're somebody who is a fan of the Spot character, or maybe you're sort of specking on this thing where you think there's a room for this book to grow when we eventually get that film. It'll definitely be interesting to see. But let's take a look at those numbers here together and see what this thing is doing. Of course, let's take a look at the 9.8s. 66 on the census. Fair market value has 450. 30-day moving is 398, but the 90-day was 532. So this is a book that, as you can see from the graph, has definitely reached that former high that it was selling for in the peak of 2021. It's had a little bit of a cool down now, but this is one of those interesting things where, you look at the census for a book like this, you know that it's a 1984 book, so there's a lot of copies out there, but there's only 66 that are currently slabbed at CGC. And I think that's one of the reasons why, you see these massive spike ups for this book, because, how many are available on eBay at the time in which, the peak FOMO sets in? There's probably only a handful. So people are, beholden to whatever those prices are at the time that they are listed on eBay. But what you're going to see happening is, now that the news is out there, there's a lot of raw copies in the 9.8 grade that are currently probably being sent into CGC. And when eventually all of those things come back to the market later on, when we start to, get more trailers of the film, when we start to get closer to the release of the film, you're going to see this influx of supply. And it'll be interesting to see what the prices for this book settle in at that particular time. I definitely don't think that it can maintain that ceiling for, the long run, but it'll still be interesting to see. Spot, a pretty cool character regardless. If you're someone who wants this book, I definitely personally would go for those raw copies, which currently on eBay right now are selling around that $20 to $50 range, depending on the deal and depending on the grade. All right, let's go on now to the third hottest comic of the week. And the third hottest comic of the week is incidentally the first appearance of one of the characters on the Spot cover. But this one right here is Amazing Spider-Man number 50, new to the list, sitting in the 95th slot. And what is the significance of this? Well, of course, this would be the first appearance of the Kingpin, a book that came out in 1967, written by Stan Lee and drawn by John Romita. And this one right here is what a lot of people would suggest is probably the all-time best cover there is in all of comic books. I mean, this one right here is the all-time classic Spider-Man walking away from the costume cover, the beautiful red cover, incredible issue. I mean, outside of the fact that this is the first appearance of one of the greatest villains in all of Marvel comic books, the Kingpin, this is also one of the great covers out there of all the books in the Silver Age. And this is one of those books that got extremely hot when we had the Hawkeye show. Of course, we had Vincent D'Onofrio make his way over to the MCU, playing Kingpin in the Hawkeye show. A lot of people started to jump on this book, started to FOMO onto this thing. But ever since we got the end of that show, this is one of those books that have had that little bit of a correction, has had that little bit of a pullback. In fact, all of the Hawkeye books in that respective show are definitely seeing their correction now. And, this is probably, a good time to jump back into a lot of these books. In fact, that's probably one of the reasons why this book is starting to trend right now, because, it's sort of been that standard, okay, 6 months later, now the books have kind of leveled off, and this might be a good time to jump back into this book because of the fact that we know that Kingpin is going to have a major role moving forward in the MCU. He is definitely likely going to be showing up in the Echo series, which we know we're getting next year. He'll probably have a lot of interactions in the future when we get the Daredevil series or Daredevil film, which pretty much is guaranteed that Charlie Cox will be doing that. So we know that Kingpin is going to have a major role in the MCU for quite some time. And for that reason, this is probably one of those books that is starting to trend back up because people are thinking this is a good time to buy in. But as we dig into the numbers for this one, let's take a look at some of the various grades. 9.8s have 7 on the census. Fair market value suggests $92,000. We don't know what that book would sell for today. We did see a 9.6 sell a year ago for the $48,000 range, but let's go down here to some of the mid grades to see what these are going for. 7.0, 421 on the census. Fair market value suggested to be around the $2,200 range. 1 year moving was $2,700. 30-day moving, however, is $2,500. So you can see this is a book that had that, kind of spike up due to the fact that it was really exciting coming off the heels of the Hawkeye show. And then, in these last 30 days or so has cooled down a little bit compared to where it was. You can see 7.5, 1 year was 31, 30-day moving now is 2,200. So things are starting to cool off. 6.0, 1 year was 1,700, 30-day is 1,600. 5.0, 1 year was 1,400, 30-day was 1,100. So generally speaking, across most of the grades right here, you can see that it had its big spike up during the Hawkeye show. It has its correction now. Who knows kind of where the floor is, but people are feeling that generally pretty safe buy-in overall based on where the prices are for this thing and what we can assume Kingpin's involvement is going to be in the future. And then, of course, at the low grade, when you go into eBay looking for the lowest copy, lowest raw grade copy you could find for this thing, you're still looking to spend around $600 or so. All right, let's go on now to the second hottest trending comic of the week. And the second hottest trending comic of the week is a very, very cool one that's interesting to talk about. And I feel like this one and the next one are going to be, kind of similar in why they're really starting to heat up and trend in this current market. But this one right here is Ms. Marvel #1, new to the list, sitting in the 37th slot. And what is the significance of this? Well, of course, this would be the first issue of Ms. Marvel's first solo series, a book that was written by Willow Wilson and came out in 2014. And of course, we all know that Ms. Marvel is currently playing on Disney Plus. We're about halfway through the season. It feels like the show has, taken a lot of the elements of this particular Ms. Marvel run and is utilizing them on the screen. And for the most part, it feels like, fans are generally enjoying the show. People are appreciating the actress's portrayal on screen. And it feels like, a lot of the keys for Ms. Marvel, not necessarily setting all new record highs, but, people are starting to think, hey, the show, it's not that bad. It's not really as bad as I thought it was going to be. Maybe I should look at some of those Ms. Marvel keys that were not selling as a result of the trailer. Maybe this girl's going to be involved in the MCU for a long time. And maybe that Ms. Marvel #1 book is something that I should add to my collection. And for good reason too, because even outside of show spec, I think this is a kind of a modern classic cover. I really, really like how they did this right here. And I think a lot of collectors really appreciate this one. I mean, certainly this is a much cooler cover in my opinion than her actual first appearance, which is the all new Marvel Now .1 book. So if I was someone who was a fan of the Ms. Marvel character, or maybe I was someone who just kind of wanted to have something nice in my collection, this might be the book that I would definitely consider picking up. And it feels like a lot of collectors are starting to jump back in on this one for that reason, because it seems like the floor prices are definitely starting to settle off. But let's take a look at here some of the values. 9.8s have 822 on the census. Fair market value is 250. 30-day moving is 250. So kind of right in line to basically what fair market value suggests. And you can see right here from this graph, I mean, look at the massive spike ups this book has had in 2021, with the height of the comic book boom, and then the huge drop off in 2022. You can see even when we got the trailer for this thing, there was still another drop off. And currently where this book is selling, I mean, if you rewind the clock back to like 2019, we're basically selling right in line to where it was in 2019. So, if you're somebody who's out there and thinking, hey, Ms. Marvel, kind of a cool character, wouldn't mind having this book. I mean, you can definitely do worse for yourself. I mean, considering some of the prices for this thing were rivaling what they were selling for in 2016, it definitely feels like a pretty safe buy if you're looking to get something at this particular level. And then of course, 2014 book, not going to see it slabbed at the low grade, but when you go onto eBay looking for raw copies of this thing, now you can see them being sold around that $70 to $80 range or so. All right, let's move on now to the #1 hottest trending comic of the week. And the #1 hottest trending comic of the week is one that we've talked about many, many times, one that I'm sure you guys are thinking about, one that of course has been showing up on a bunch of hot lists. This one of course is Thor God of Thunder #2, up 20 spots, now sitting in the #7 slot. And what is the significance of this? Well, of course, this would be the first appearance of Gore the God Butcher, a book that was written by Jason Aaron that came out in 2012. And of course, we all know why this book is trending in the market. We all know why this book has all the eyeballs it has on it because of the fact that, in a couple weeks time, we're going to be getting the release for Thor Love and Thunder. We know Christian Bale is playing Gore the God Butcher, the main antagonist of the film. And this is one of those books that the market has been speculating on for quite some time. When we rewind the clock back to Disney Investor Day in 2020, it was originally announced that, or Kevin Feige had originally announced that Gore the God Butcher was going to be the villain of Thor Love and Thunder, and he was going to be played by Christian Bale. And that really instantly catapulted this book into a new stratosphere of value. But this book right here has really been victim to that spec game where, a lot of people are trying to sell this thing, but not a lot of people are trying to buy this thing. When we look at some of the values where it is now, it's really dropped off even below that of where it was selling for originally when we got the announcement. So I think kind of where it is right now is looking at the floor values, knowing that we're going into Thor Love and Thunder, it feels like a lot of collectors are thinking, hey, you know what? Actually, ironically, this is not a bad time to buy this book because there's a lot of copies out there, a lot of people looking to move their copies, and the prices really aren't that bad if I'm someone who is a fan of the Gore the God Butcher character. And I think once we start to get the film, you're going to see the real fans be converted, in the coming months, and this book's floor values are really going to start to settle in. But speaking of values, let's take a look at some of the numbers here, and let's go down here to the 9.8s. 1,282 on the census, fair market value 325, 30-day moving 344. But one of the things that's interesting is when you look at that graph right there, look at the up it's had and the down it's had. Now, I'm not going to say that this is a book that is totally crashed, but when we talk about, extreme values, this is definitely one that is a demonstration of peaks and highs for a particular book. You can see right here, this is where it was selling for in November of 2020, $216 at the 9.8 grade. This was the, month before the announcement for Gore the God Butcher. Once we got the announcement, it shot way up, and now we're selling selling basically, around where we were before the announcement. So this book has had a huge rise and a huge fall. And, I think a lot of collectors are starting to think, hey, $300, not too bad an entry point if I'm someone who actually likes this character and I just want to have it because I'm a fan of this particular run and I want to have it in a 9.8 slab and look at it on my shelf. Not a bad price to jump in on this thing. And then, of course, a 2012 book, not going to see it slabbed at the low grade. But when you go into eBay looking for raw copies of this thing, you can now see them being sold around that $120 to $140 range, depending on the deal and depending on the grade that you can find for yourself. Anyways, that is all for this video. Those were Go Collect's hottest trending comics for the week. Let me know what you guys think. Do you guys have any of these books? Drop me a like, comment, subscribe if you're enjoying the content, and I'll see you in the next video.